The mountain wind cut through the trees like a knife as Jinho made his final patrol of the evening. He had walked these trails for 3 years now, ever since he left the military, and chose the silence of the forest over the noise of the city. The sun was setting behind the peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Everything seemed normal until he saw the smoke. Black smoke rose from somewhere deep in the valley, a place where no campfire should be. Jinho's training kicked in immediately. He adjusted his pack and started running toward the smoke, his boots finding purchase on the rocky trail, even in the fading light. As he got closer, he smelled something strange. It wasn't wood smoke or anything natural. It smelled like burning metal and something else he couldn't identify. When he reached the source, Jinho stopped dead in his tracks. A massive object had carved a path through the forest, leaving broken trees and scorched earth in its wake. It was buried halfway into the mountainside, and it definitely wasn't from Earth. The hull was smooth and dark, covered in symbols that seemed to glow faintly with violet light. Parts of it were still smoking. Jin Ho approached carefully. His hand moved to the emergency radio on his belt, but something stopped him. If he called this in, the military would arrive within hours. They would seal off the area, and whoever was inside that ship would become a prisoner or a test subject. He knew how these things worked. He had seen what happened to people when governments got involved. A sound came from inside the ship, a groan, weak and pained. Jinho made his decision. He climbed over the torn metal and squeezed through a gap in the hull. Inside, emergency lights flickered red. The air was thick and hard to breathe. Jinho pulled his flashlight from his belt and swept it around the interior. The ship was small, maybe designed for 1 or 2 passengers. Equipment he didn't recognize lined the walls, most of it damaged or sparking. And there, strapped into a seat that looked like it had been designed for someone with a different body shape, was a woman. Not at least, Jinho thought it was a woman. She was humanoid in shape, with 2 arms and 2 legs, but her skin was silver and seemed to shimmer in the flashlight beam. Her hair was long and white, almost glowing. She wore some kind of uniform, torn and stained with liquid that might have been blood, though it was darker than human blood. Her eyes were closed, and her breathing was shallow and rapid. Jinho moved closer and knelt beside her. His medic training took over. He checked her pulse, or what he hoped was her pulse. There was a rhythm there, but it was irregular and weak. Her skin was turning gray, and when he touched her neck, it was cold. Too cold. She was dying. He looked around for a medical kit, anything that might help. He found a device mounted on the wall that looked like it might be medical equipment, but the display was cracked and showing symbols he couldn't read. Whatever had kept her alive during the crash had failed. The woman's eyes opened suddenly. They were amber-colored and seemed to glow with their own light. She looked at Jinho and tried to speak, but the words came out in a language he had never heard before. Then she coughed, and dark blood came from her mouth. Her eyes were full of fear and pain. Jinho had seen that look before. On battlefields, in field hospitals, in the faces of people who knew they were dying. He knew what it meant when someone's skin turned gray and cold, when their breathing became desperate. Her body was shutting down. He made a choice that would change everything. Jinho pulled his field medic kit from his pack. Inside was equipment for emergencies, including supplies for blood transfusions. He had carried it for years, even after leaving the military, because he couldn't help himself. He always needed to be prepared to help. This was insane. He knew it was insane. Human blood shouldn't work for an alien. Their biology was probably completely different. This should kill them both. But she was dying right now, and he had nothing else to try. He worked quickly, his hands steady despite the fear. He set up the transfusion line, found what looked like a major blood vessel in her arm, and inserted the needle. Then he did the same to himself. He had done this procedure a dozen times in the field, always transferring from one human to another. Never to something that wasn't human. His blood began to flow through the tube, dark red against the clear plastic. When it entered her body, Jinho held his breath and waited for her to convulse or for something terrible to happen. For a long moment, nothing changed. The woman's breathing remained weak and rapid. Her skin stayed gray. Jinho felt the blood leaving his body and wondered if he had just killed them both. Then her breathing deepened. The gray color began to fade from her skin, replaced by that silvery shimmer. Her eyes opened wider, the amber glow becoming brighter. She looked at the tube connecting them, then at Jinho's face. Her expression was one of complete shock. She tried to speak again, and this time Jinho recognized one word. It was Korean, heavily accented but clear. "Impossible," she whispered. Jinho kept the transfusion going until he started to feel dizzy. He had given her almost a liter of blood, maybe more. It was dangerous, but it was working. Her vital signs were stabilizing. The color had returned to her skin. She was breathing normally now. He disconnected the line and bandaged both of their arms. The woman was unconscious again, but this time it looked like normal sleep rather than dying. Her chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Whatever had been killing her, his blood had stopped it. At least for now. Jinho sat back against the ship's wall, feeling weak from blood loss. He needed to get her out of here before someone else found the crash site. He needed to get her somewhere safe where she could recover. And then he needed to figure out what the hell he had just done. He looked at the sleeping alien woman and shook his head. 3 years ago, he had come to these mountains to get away from making impossible choices. Now he had just made the biggest one of his life. The ship's emergency lights flickered and died, leaving them in darkness except for Jinho's flashlight. Outside, night had fallen completely. He had work to do. He needed to move her to his cabin, 3 kilometers away. He needed to hide the ship as best he could. And he needed to do it all before morning. Jinho stood up, testing his balance. He was lightheaded, but functional. He had been through worse. He carefully unstrapped the woman from her seat and lifted her in his arms. She was lighter than he expected, and her skin felt warm now instead of cold. That was a good sign. As he carried her out of the wrecked ship and into the night. Jinho couldn't know that he had just set in motion events that would change not just his life, but the future of the entire human race. All he knew was that someone had needed help, and he had given it. That was enough. The mountain wind had grown colder, and the first stars were appearing in the clear sky above. Some of those stars, Jinho now knew, had people living near them. And one of those people was now asleep in his arms, alive because he had refused to let her die alone in a crashed ship on a world far from her home. 3 days passed before the woman woke up again. Jinho spent that time taking care of her in his small cabin, checking her vital signs, keeping her warm, and watching for any signs of rejection or complications from the transfusion. He had also spent hours hiking back to the crash site, covering the ship with branches and debris, making it harder to spot from the air. So far, no search parties had arrived. No helicopters. No military vehicles. Maybe her ship had crashed without anyone else noticing. Or maybe her people didn't know where to look. On the morning of the 4th day, Jinho was preparing breakfast when he heard movement from the bedroom. He quickly walked to the doorway and saw her sitting up in bed, looking around the cabin with those glowing amber eyes. When she saw him, she didn't appear frightened. Instead, she looked curious and confused. She spoke in that same alien language from before, a flowing series of sounds that Jinho couldn't begin to understand. When he shook his head, she stopped and seemed to think for a moment. Then she touched something behind her ear, a small device he hadn't noticed before. It made a soft beeping sound. "Can you understand me now?" she asked. Her voice was clear, speaking perfect Korean, though it still had a musical quality that was definitely not human. "Yes," Jin-Ho replied. "How do you feel?" "Alive," she said, and there was wonder in her voice. "Which should not be possible. What did you do to me?" Jin-Ho explained the transfusion as simply as he could. As he talked, he watched her face change from confusion to disbelief to something like awe. "You gave me your blood," she said slowly. "Your human blood. That should have killed me. Our biology is completely different. The proteins alone should have caused massive rejection. I should be dead 3 times over. But you're not," Jin-Ho said. "You're alive. That's what matters." She stared at him for a long moment. "Why did you do it? You didn't know if it would work. You could have died. You could have just left me there." Jin-Ho shrugged. "You were dying. I had to try something. You don't even know who I am. What I am. Does it matter? You needed help." The woman was quiet, and Jin-Ho saw something like confusion in her expression, as if he had just said something that didn't make sense to her. Finally, she spoke again. "My name is Lyra. I am a royal science curator of the Valorian Empire. My ship was damaged during a research mission in this sector. I managed to reach your planet before my life support failed." She paused. "I owe you my life. By the laws of my people, this creates a debt that must be repaid." "You don't owe me anything," Jin-Ho said. "I'm just glad you're okay. You don't understand. Among my people, a life debt is sacred. I must give you something of equal value." Lyra tried to stand, wobbled, and Jin-Ho quickly moved to help her. She leaned on him as they walked to the main room of the cabin. "Do you have my belongings? The things from my ship?" Jin-Ho gestured to a table where he had placed the items he had recovered. A damaged bag, some strange tools, and a metal case about the size of a book. Lyra reached for the case and opened it carefully. Inside, nestled in protective foam, was a crystal about the size of Jin-Ho's fist. It was clear, but seemed to have light moving inside it, like captured stars. "This is a nanomedical archive," Lyra explained. "It contains the healing knowledge of my civilization and hundreds of others. Treatment protocols, genetic therapies, surgical techniques, everything we have learned about medicine over millions of years." She looked at Jin-Ho seriously. "It is worth more than some planets. My empire forbids sharing this knowledge with species that have not reached a certain level of development. Your people are considered too primitive. Then you should keep it," Jin-Ho said. "You still don't understand." Lyra touched a device on her wrist, and a holographic display appeared in the air. It showed what looked like a medical scan. "When I woke up this morning, I ran a full-body analysis. The transfusion didn't just save my life. It changed both of us. Your blood now carries traces of my genetic markers. My blood carries yours. We are connected now, linked in a way that my science calls resonance bonding." She manipulated the display, and Jin-Ho saw an image that looked like a human body. His body. Parts of it were highlighted in red. "I also found this," Lyra continued, her voice softer now. "You have a genetic condition. A disease. It is dormant now, but in approximately 5 years, it will activate. It will slowly destroy your nervous system. You will lose control of your muscles, your ability to speak, eventually your ability to breathe. There is no cure in your medical science." Jin-Ho stared at the display. He had no symptoms. He felt fine. But looking at those red markers, he believed her. He had wondered sometimes why he never felt quite right, why exhaustion came easier than it should. Now he knew. "I'm sorry," Lyra said. But this archive can save you. The knowledge inside includes treatments for thousands of genetic conditions, including yours. You can cure yourself. She held out the crystal to him. Jinho looked at it, but didn't take it. How many other people have this same disease? He asked. How many have other diseases that this archive could cure? I don't have statistics for your species, but genetic conditions are common in all species. Probably millions on your world alone. Then I can't just use it for myself, Jinho said. If this knowledge can save millions of people, keeping it secret would be wrong. Lyra's eyes widened. You would share it? Even though my empire has forbidden it? Even though it could bring you wealth and power beyond measure if you kept it to yourself? It's not mine to keep. It's knowledge. It should belong to everyone. For a long moment, Lyra just looked at him. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed. It was a beautiful sound like music. In my empire, we value honor above all things, she said. But our honor is transactional. You do for me, I do for you. Everything has a price and a value. We forgot something along the way. She placed the crystal in Jinho's hand and closed his fingers around it. We forgot that some things are done simply because they should be done. You have reminded me of that. What will happen to you? Jinho asked. If your empire finds out you gave this to me, I will be exiled, stripped of my position, and forbidden from returning home. Lyra smiled, and it was sad but also free. But perhaps that is not such a terrible thing. My home has become a place of rigid rules and forgotten compassion. Maybe exile is another kind of freedom. Jinho looked down at the crystal in his hand. It was warm and seemed to pulse with a gentle light. Inside this small object was the power to change everything, to cure diseases that had killed millions, to extend human life, to end so much suffering. I'll need help, he said. I'm a medic, not a researcher. I don't know how to use this knowledge properly. I will teach you, Lyra said. I have nowhere else to go anyway. And I find that I am curious to see what humans will do with this gift. I suspect you will surprise me. You can stay here as long as you need, Jinho offered. The cabin isn't much, but it's safe. Thank you. Lyra looked around the simple room with its wood stove and basic furniture. I have lived in palaces and research stations that orbit stars, but I think this small cabin may be the first place I have ever felt truly welcome. Over the following weeks, Lyra taught Jinho how to access the archive. The crystal connected directly to computer systems and could display its information in any language. The knowledge inside was vast and incredibly detailed. Jinho quickly realized he needed help from experts in genetics, biology, and medicine. He reached out to two people he trusted. Minji, a geneticist he had known in the military who now worked at a university, and Do-Yun, a computer specialist who believed that information should be free and accessible to all. He told them the truth, showed them Lyra, and showed them the archive. Their reactions were exactly what he had hoped for. Not greed or fear, but wonder and determination to help. Together, the four of them began the work of translating alien medical knowledge into treatments that could save human lives. It would take years. It would require secrecy and careful planning. But it would be worth it, as Jinho worked late into the night, studying information about genetic diseases and their cures. He often thought about that moment in the crashed ship. One choice made in desperation had led to all of this. He had given his blood to save a stranger, and she had given him knowledge to save the world. Outside the cabin, stars filled the sky. Some of those stars were part of the Valorian Empire. Lyra sometimes stood outside and looked up at them, and Jinho wondered if she missed her home. But when she came back inside and returned to work, there was a lightness in her expression that suggested she had found something better than what she had lost. The future was uncertain. But for now, in a small cabin in the mountains, 4 people worked to change the course of human history. And it all started because one man chose to help when it would have been easier to walk away. 5 years passed in what felt like both an eternity and a moment. The small team working in Jinho's mountain cabin had grown, but not by much. They kept their circle tight, trusting only a handful of people with the truth about the alien archive and the knowledge it contained. Jinho looked different now. The treatment derived from the archive had cured his genetic disease before it could manifest symptoms. But more than that, the years of stress and work had changed him. He was thinner, more serious, with gray beginning to show in his hair, despite being only 37. The weight of keeping secrets and making decisions that affected millions of lives had taken its toll. Min-ji worked at her computer station, analyzing genetic sequences that would have seemed impossible just 5 years ago. She had aged too, but her eyes still lit up with excitement whenever they achieved a breakthrough. "We're ready," she said, looking up from her screen. "The leukemia treatment is stable. We can release it." Daoyun nodded from across the room, where multiple screens displayed data streams and encrypted communications. "I've got 3 pharmaceutical companies ready to receive the formula through our usual channels. They'll think they discovered it themselves. The trail leads nowhere." This was how they had been working for 5 years. They would take a treatment from the archive, translate it for human biology, test it carefully, and then release it into the world anonymously. They used shell corporations, hacked databases to plant research, and created false trails that made it look like human scientists had made the discoveries. The results had been extraordinary. Cancer treatments that worked without destroying healthy cells. Regeneration therapies that could heal nerve damage. Gene therapies that cured inherited diseases. Every few months, the medical world celebrated a new miracle breakthrough. Never knowing the truth, lives were saved by the thousands, then hundreds of thousands, then millions. Jinho kept count. He had a map on his wall with pins showing where their treatments had reached. It was covered in pins now, spreading across every continent. Lyra entered the room carrying a tray with coffee for everyone. She had adapted well to life on Earth, learning to cook human food and wear human clothes. But her silver skin and glowing amber eyes meant she couldn't leave the cabin. To the world, she didn't exist. She had made peace with that. "You all look tired," she said, distributing the cups. "You should rest." "We'll rest when we're done," Minji replied, but she smiled and accepted the coffee gratefully. "You're never done," Lyra pointed out. "There's always another disease to cure, another treatment to release. You will work yourselves to death, trying to save everyone. Better than sitting back and doing nothing," Jinho said. Lyra gave him a look that was both fond and exasperated. She had learned to read human expressions well over the years. "You sound like me when I first gave you the archive. I thought you would use it selfishly. Instead, you have worked harder than anyone I have ever known. Because it matters," Jinho said simply. An alert sounded from Doyun's computer. He typed rapidly, his expression growing serious. "We have a problem. Someone's been tracking the pattern of medical breakthroughs. A journalist named Yunji. She's published an article suggesting that all the recent advances have been too convenient, too perfectly timed. She thinks there's a single source. Can you stop it from spreading?" Minji asked. "Already too late. It's gone viral. Major news networks are picking it up." Daoyun pulled up the article on the main screen. "She's good." She traced the shell corporations, found the connections. She doesn't know about the archive or Lyra yet, but she knows something strange is happening. And she's determined to find out what. "Where is she based?" Jinho asked. "Seoul, about 3 hours from here." "Then we invite her to visit," Jinho said. The room went silent. Everyone stared at him. Are you insane? Minji said. If she learns the truth and publishes it, everything changes. Governments will come for the archive. For Lyra, they'll shut us down. Everything is going to change anyway, Jinho replied. This journalist has already found the pattern. Others will follow. We can't keep this secret forever. Maybe it's time to stop hiding. The Empire will know, Lyra said quietly. If humanity learns about me, about the archive, word will spread to other species. My people will find out what I did. They will come. I know, Jinho said. But we've already helped millions. We've changed human medicine forever. Even if they take the archive away now, we've done good work. Important work. Maybe it's enough. They debated for hours. In the end, they voted. It was unanimous. They would invite Yoonji to the cabin and tell her everything. Let her decide what to do with the truth. 3 days later, a car drove up the mountain road and parked outside the cabin. Yoonji stepped out, a woman in her early 30s with sharp eyes and a recording device in her hand. She looked excited and nervous. Jinho met her at the door. Thank you for coming. Your message said you had information about the medical breakthroughs, Yoonji said. I'm hoping this isn't a waste of time. It's not. Please, come in. Yoonji entered the cabin and froze when she saw Lyra standing by the window. For a long moment, the journalist just stared, her mouth slightly open. Then she raised her recording device. Before you record anything, Jinho said, please listen to the full story. Then decide what you want to do. They told her everything. The crash, the transfusion, the archive, the 5 years of secret work. They showed her the crystal and demonstrated how it worked. They showed her the map with thousands of pins, each one representing lives saved. Yoonji listened without interrupting. Her expression went through shock, disbelief, wonder, and finally a kind of awe. When they finished, she sat in silence for a long time. This is the biggest story in human history, she finally said. Aliens exist. One of them has been living here, helping us. You've been curing diseases with alien technology. She looked at Jinho. Why tell me? You could have kept hiding. Because hiding means moving slowly and carefully, Jinho replied. It means saving thousands when we could save millions. The archive has so much more to offer, but we can't use it all in secret. We need help. We need resources. We need the world to know. If I publish this, your lives will never be the same, Yoonji warned. You'll lose your privacy. Governments will get involved. Some people will call you heroes. Others will call you criminals for hiding alien contact. We know, Minji said, but we're tired of hiding. We want to do more. Yoonji looked at her recording device, then at the faces around the room. I need time to think about how to present this. This isn't just a news story. This is something that will change everything. Take all the time you need, Jinho said. Yoonji left an hour later, carrying the biggest secret in the world. For 3 days, Jinho and his team waited, not knowing what she would decide. They continued their work, releasing another treatment for a type of blindness, knowing it might be one of the last times they could work in secret. On the 4th day, the article appeared. It was not what Jinho expected. Yoonji hadn't just written a news story. She had crafted a careful narrative that introduced humanity to the truth in a way that emphasized the good that had been done. She called Jinho and Lyra heroes. She showed the faces of people who had been saved by the treatments. She asked a simple question. What kind of people use the greatest gift in history to help others instead of themselves? The article went viral within hours. News networks around the world picked it up. Within a day, the story had reached every continent, every country, every connected device on Earth. Humanity learned that aliens existed. That one lived among them, and that she had been saving lives. The reaction was explosive. Jinho's cabin was soon surrounded by news crews, military vehicles, and government officials. They had to evacuate to a secure location provided by the UN. Suddenly, Jinho and Lyra were the most famous people on Earth. Some hailed them as saviors. Others demanded Lyra's arrest. Religious groups debated the theological implications. Scientists begged for access to the archive. Politicians argued about who should control it. The world was in chaos, but it was a chaos born of hope and possibility. And somewhere in the depths of space, the Valorian Empire received word that their exiled curator had shared forbidden knowledge with a primitive species. A fleet began to gather, preparing to travel to Earth to retrieve what had been stolen and punish those responsible. The small choice made in a crashed ship 5 years ago had grown into something vast and unstoppable. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity existed, and Jinho was about to discover that saving lives sometimes meant fighting for the right to continue doing so. The UN building in Geneva had never been so crowded. Representatives from every nation on Earth gathered in the main assembly hall, along with scientists, religious leaders, ethicists, and military commanders. At the center of it all stood Jinho and Lyra, facing questions that had no easy answers. "You had no right to hide this from the world," an American delegate said angrily. "First contact with alien life should have been disclosed immediately. You violated every international protocol." "There were no protocols," Jinho replied calmly. "No one knew aliens existed. I made the choice I thought was right. I saved a life. Then we used the knowledge she gave to save millions more. I won't apologize for that." "The knowledge should belong to all nations equally," a Chinese representative argued. "You've been releasing treatments selectively through your network. That gives certain corporations and countries unfair advantages." "We release treatments based on need, not politics," Mingji interjected. She sat beside Jinho, along with Do-Yun. The team had decided to face this together. Children dying of genetic diseases don't care about national borders or corporate profits. The debate raged for hours. Some delegates wanted the archive seized and put under UN control. Others wanted it distributed freely to all nations. A few suggested it should be destroyed, claiming the knowledge was too dangerous. Religious leaders argued about whether using alien technology violated divine will. Scientists begged to be allowed to study it. Through it all, Lyra sat quietly, listening. She had been offered the chance to speak, but had declined, saying this was a human matter to decide. But Jinho could see the sadness in her eyes as she listened to people argue over the gift she had given. Finally, the Secretary General called for order. This debate could continue for months. But we need to address the immediate situation. Dr. Lyra, you stated that your empire forbids sharing advanced technology with less developed species. What will they do when they learn what has happened here? Lyra stood. The room fell silent. "They will send ships," she said simply. "They will demand the return of the archive and my extradition to face punishment. They will view humanity as thieves and criminals. The Valorian Empire does not negotiate with species they consider inferior. Will they attack?" A military commander asked. "Not initially. They will make demands and expect compliance. But if Earth refuses, they have the military power to take what they want. Your weapons would be ineffective against their technology." The room erupted in worried conversation. The idea of an alien invasion, even a limited one, terrified people who had just learned aliens existed a week ago. "How long do we have?" the Secretary General asked. "Their ships can cross the distance to Earth in approximately 30 days, Lyra replied. "Maybe less if they prioritize speed over comfort." "Then we have a month to prepare," Jinho said. "A month to decide who we want to be as a species." "What do you mean?" someone asked. Jinho stood and faced the assembly. We can give them what they want. Hand over the archive, turn over Lyra, and hope they leave us alone. That's the safe choice. Or we can stand by what we've done and say that saving lives matters more than following their rules. That's the right choice. But it's also the dangerous one. You're suggesting we risk war with an advanced alien civilization? A delegate said incredulously. That's suicide. Maybe, Jinho admitted. But I've spent 5 years working to save human lives. I'm not going to hand over the thing that makes. Laws that exist to maintain your power, not to serve justice. Kren's crystalline form seemed to shine brighter. We have watched humanity for decades. They are young, crude in some ways, but they have something remarkable. They feel empathy for strangers. They sacrifice for people they will never meet. When given godlike knowledge, they used it to heal rather than to conquer. They are primitives who stumbled into technology they don't understand. They understood it well enough to save millions of lives, Kren countered. Tell me, Commander Vex, when was the last time the Valorian Empire shared its medical knowledge freely with a species in need? Vex had no answer to that. The negotiations continued for 3 days. More representatives from the allied civilizations joined, each one supporting Earth's right to keep the archive and protect Lyra. They pointed out that the Valorian Empire's laws were self-serving, and that humanity had demonstrated greater wisdom with the archive than the Empire had, shown in hoarding it. On the 4th day, something unexpected happened. A message came from Velaris, the Valorian homeworld. It wasn't from the military or the government. It was from ordinary Valorian citizens who had been following the standoff. They had seen the testimonials from Earth. They had watched interviews with parents holding children who would have died without the treatments. They had heard Jinho explain why he chose to share rather than hoard. And many of them had begun to ask why their own empire kept so much knowledge locked away, using it as a tool of power rather than a gift to share. A movement had started on Velaris, demanding reform, demanding that the Empire remember the original purpose of their archives, to preserve and share knowledge that could help all species thrive. The movement was small but growing, and it was causing political problems for the leadership. Commander Vex received new orders. Negotiate a compromise. The Empire couldn't afford to look tyrannical in front of the galaxy while their own citizens questioned their values. The final agreement took another week to hammer out. The Valorian Empire would not reclaim the archive. Lyra's exile would be lifted, though she would not be forced to return. In exchange, Earth would join a new initiative, the Galactic Medical Commons, where species would share healing knowledge freely. The Valorian Empire would contribute their archives, as would the other civilizations present. It wasn't everything anyone wanted, but it was enough. The day the agreement was signed, Jinho stood on the observation deck of Earth's first orbital station, watching the alien ships prepare to leave. Lyra stood beside him, along with Minji, Do-Yoon, and Yoonji, who had become the official liaison between Earth and the alien visitors. I can go home now, Lyra said quietly. The exile is lifted, but I don't think I will. Why not? Jinho asked. Because home is where you choose to be, not where you were born. I've found more purpose here in 5 years than I had in 50 years on Velaris. Your people make me want to be better than I was. You're welcome to stay as long as you want, Jinho said. Besides, Minji added with a smile, we need you. The Galactic Medical Commons is going to need administrators who understand both alien and human medicine. You're literally the only person qualified. The alien ships began to depart, one by one, but they left behind ambassadors and scientists, representatives from a dozen civilizations eager to establish formal contact with humanity. Earth had been invited to join the galactic community, not as a junior member or a curiosity, but as an equal. The simple act of helping someone in need had earned humanity more respect than weapons or threats ever could. As the ships vanished into the distance, Jinho thought about that night 5 years ago when he found a crashed vessel on a mountainside. He had been trying to escape from the world, to find peace in isolation. Instead, he had found purpose in connection. "Do you ever regret it?" Lyra asked, as if reading his thoughts. "Saving me that night? Your life became so complicated because of that choice." "Never," Jinho said. "Not for a second." In orbit above Earth, construction had begun on the headquarters for the Galactic Medical Commons. It would be a place where species from across the galaxy could come to share knowledge, to learn from each other, to find cures for diseases that plagued all forms of life. At its entrance, they would place a memorial dot. It would show 2 hands clasped together, one human, one DeLorean. And beneath it, words in every language spoken in the galaxy. From one act of compassion, hope for billions. The medical archive that began as a life debt had become the foundation for something greater. Species that had hoarded knowledge for millennia were now learning to share. Ancient rivalries were being set aside in the name of healing. And at the center of it all was a simple truth that Jinho had understood from the beginning. When you have the power to help, you help. Not for glory or reward, but because it's the right thing to do. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not technology or weapons or wealth, but a reminder of something essential that many had forgotten. Lyra looked at the stars, at the ships departing for distant worlds, carrying news of what had happened here. "They'll tell stories about this," she said. About the medic who gave his blood to save a stranger. About the civilization that chose compassion over power. The galaxy needed this story. Needed to remember that kindness matters. "It's not just a story," Jinho said. "It's what we do every day. Save lives. Help people. Make things better. That doesn't stop just because we signed some agreement." "No," Lyra agreed. "It's only just beginning." Below them, Earth continued its eternal rotation, a small blue planet that had suddenly become one of the most important worlds in the galaxy. Not because of military might or technological achievement, but because the people there had proven something simple and profound, that when given the choice between selfishness and generosity, between hiding and sharing, between fear and hope, humans chose hope. Every time and that choice had filled the galaxy with something it desperately needed. Not just medical knowledge or technological advancement, but genuine belief that things could be better, that different species could work together. That compassion was not weakness, but the greatest strength of all. In a small museum on Earth, they preserved a vial containing a mixture of human and Valorian blood, the blood that had started everything. School children would visit and learn about the night. A forest ranger saved an alien's life and changed the course of history. Jinho knew the truth was simpler than the legend. He hadn't set out to change history. He had just seen someone who needed help and refused to walk away. Everything that followed the cures, the alliance, the new era of cooperation had grown from that one moment of basic human decency. As he stood on the observation deck watching the stars, Jinho felt at peace. His life hadn't turned out how he expected when he fled to those mountains 5 years ago. He had wanted isolation and found connection. He had wanted simplicity and found purpose. He had wanted to escape from making hard choices and instead made choices that changed the galaxy. But he wouldn't change any of it. Because in the end, the only choice that really mattered was the simplest one. When someone needs help, you help them. Everything else follows from that.